From Hamas to Hezbollah and the Houthi militants of Yemen, the theocratic dictatorship of Iran is backing terrorist proxy groups around the Middle East, threatening U.S. allies, including Israel, and dangerously impacting international shipping and trade. The Iranian regime continues to defy United Nations resolutions by pursuing a nuclear weapon and developing long-range ballistic missiles. It also is aligned with China, Russia, and North Korea in an axis of authoritarian powers, and it's making increasingly provocative but little reported moves in Africa. I'm Guy Taylor, National Security Editor at The Washington Times, and for this edition of the Threat Status Influencers series, I'm joined by Norman Roule, who served for 34 years in the Central Intelligence Agency, managing significant programs relating to the Middle East, and serving for nearly a decade as the U.S. National Intelligence Manager for Iran, the NIM-I, as it's known in national security circles. Norm, thank you for joining me. You're currently a senior advisor to the Center for Strategic and International Studies and to the bipartisan group United Against Nuclear Iran, or UANI. In a nutshell, you're a highly sought-after expert on Iran. Let's jump right into this. What is the actual tissue of connectivity between Iran, China, and Russia, and why does it matter to the United States? And what is the most concerning trend line tied to this in 2024?
Over the past 10 years, the United States has appropriately looked at great power conflict as an issue for defining our defense and strategic policy. That's appropriate. But we often consider this in terms of global conflict or major wars. But if you look at how the world has changed dramatically and how the three great revisionist actors, Iran, China, and Russia, have worked together and expanded their influence, they've actually used gray zone power, sort of half measures that fall below the level of conventional war, and they have succeeded in spreading power across broad geographies, sometimes on their own, but in some cases in Africa together. Let me unpack this. In China, you obviously have the Chinese creating small islands that they claim are their property in the South China Sea to give them control over a vast amount of water. Initially, any one of these islands would certainly not be something where we would risk conflict. But we now look at a situation where China has 22 separate installations. They're now telling the Philippines or Vietnam that what elements of sea traffic can go into the various waters. And the weapons China's using, it's not missile attacks, they're using water hoses or blocking with ships. As we move to Iran and the Middle East, Iran has created a series of islands of its own. Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Yemen, the Palestinian territories, where these various locations are used by Iran to push out against Western, Israeli, and Arab interests. The weapons involved are also dramatically different. Explosively formed projectiles, ballistic missiles, drones. But we're also watching this group of people reach out, just as China's operations touching the global economy. Now you have the Houthis touching the global economy. Red Sea operations by the Houthis have touched 65 countries. So now let's move to Africa, where we have Russia and increasingly Iran, working in a number of countries from Niger to the Sudan. These countries are the home of Islamic insurgencies, and previously U.S. bases, but also the location of hugely important critical minerals, important for the green economy. And again, you're looking at locations where control allows someone to touch the global economy and the strategic interests of a number of countries.
Let's drill in for a second to Tehran's backing of Houthi militants in Yemen. What is the impact of this campaign of anti-ship ballistic missile attacks by the Houthis? What is the global impact here, and why should we really care about that from Washington?
Let's step out and for a moment and look at a map of the world in our mind's eye. In the world, you have, we'll call it 8, maybe 11 major maritime choke points. And these maritime choke points are critical to the flow of international commerce and the national securities of many countries. The Red Sea has about 10 to 15% of the world's trade. But around the Arabian Peninsula, you actually have 3 of the most important of the international maritime choke points: the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandab at the bottom of the Red Sea, and the Suez Canal to the north. But more so, the Middle East is, well, it's in the middle. And it's in the middle of trade, of communications. There are at least 11 communications cables in the Red Sea that contain most, if not all, of the communications between Asia and Europe. These are theoretically interruptible by the Houthis. And indeed, one Houthi attack caused what appears to be a ship to drag its anchor and damage 4 of these cables, temporarily halting some communications between Europe and Asia. It is an extraordinarily sensitive location. So what has happened since the Houthi attacks have begun? Well, there have been no liquid natural gas exports in the Red Sea for 4 or 5 months. In February, 90% of the container traffic, and these are containers that contain everything from car parts to anything you can imagine that's on these large ships. But it also touched human beings. The aid going to Sudanese refugees, to Yemen itself, was delayed because of these attacks, sometimes by weeks. And it cost aid organizations a lot more to get it there. You're even touching the climate. If the climate is your concern, well, the ships that have to transit around Africa are producing as much as 40% more pollution than the ships that would go through the Red Sea. The ship operations cost $1 million more. So the costs go up for everyone in the world.
What about Hezbollah, Norm? Why is Hezbollah, the Lebanon-based group that's been designated for many years by the United States and Europe as a global terrorist organization, why is it considered to be the most dangerous or powerful of the Iran proxies?
Hezbollah has a vast network of rockets and missiles that has developed over the years. Now, the number is about 150,000. But really what's most important in that is you've got 4,000 to 7,000 precision-guided munitions that would saturate Israeli defenses and inflict terrific economic damage and human cost on Israel itself. Now, in fairness, that conflict would invite a dramatic Israeli response and U.S. support. So the impact on the Lebanese people as well would be horrendous. If you're looking at the conflict of Gaza by any measure, in a war with Lebanon, the damage on Lebanon would be equally severe, if not more so.
Let's shift to address the power structure stability of the Iranian regime. In May, Iran's president, Raisi, died in a surprise helicopter crash. How does the Raisi death impact the bigger succession battle surrounding Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, who's well over 80 years old? Many people thought that Raisi could be a successor to Khamenei as the next Supreme Leader. How do you see that Supreme Leader succession battle playing out?
So Iran is going through a succession transition of generational importance, unique in its history. The revolutionary generation is passing from the scene. A new generation of leaders who are younger, less experienced in the revolution, only modest experience in the Iran-Iraq War, but heavy experience 2003 are taking over. If you're the Supreme Leader Khamenei, your goal is to usher in an architecture that assures the ideology of the revolution is sustained for another generation. That made Raisi such a great candidate. Cut from the same cloth ideologically as the Supreme Leader, only about 62, 63 when he died. So that would give you about 30 years of the revolution. And he had repeatedly proven his ideological soundness and loyalty to the regime's most hardline principles. So the Supreme Leader's got to find someone else who can fill that role.
But you don't see Raisi's death as potentially the beginning of a disruption to that secession process that could lead perhaps to Islamic Republican Guard takeover or some kind of other transition in Iran, including an opposition uprising.
So you raise a very important point. If you're a policymaker, exactly who and what title the person holds runs Iran is not important. What is important is what is the DNA of that relationship and how are they going to deal with the United States and other actors. So if it's a strong president or prime minister or supreme leader with a weak president, prime minister, or supreme leader as a partner. That's less important as who sits in the chairs and what does it mean for the world. Now, what we see is a likelihood that the next generation of Iran's leadership will be somewhat younger, probably in their 60s. There'll be individuals who have watched Iran defy the West successfully and spread its wings in the region at no cost and build a nuclear program since the year 2000. It'll be a group of individuals who see value in economic and political relations to a degree with Russia and China. But it will also be hardliners who believe in the foundations of the regime and support a sense of religion as a foundation of the government, just as late year Soviet leaders supported communism. Now, where do I believe the regime is going? It's rotting. That's clear. And there's an increasingly large number of people who are opposed to the government. There are still many people supportive of the government, although many don't like to talk about it, but it's a reality. So you're looking at a situation where the end of the Iranian regime is inevitable, and when it happens, people will say, I predicted it, and that may take some time, years, before that happens.
Let's talk a little bit about the nuclear weapons situation. Iran has engaged recently in renewed diplomatic meetings with North Korea. Is there a missile and nuclear expertise sharing going on between Tehran and Pyongyang? And then more broadly, what is the real danger of Iran becoming a nuclear armed state?
My sense is that Iran has all of the technological skills it needs for a nuclear weapon. The Iranians do not need North Korea to build a nuclear weapon. There may be some missile technology that North Korea can provide, and there may be some other technology that North Korea can provide to assist Iran on submarines or naval mines or other tools that are equally lethal and disruptive to regional security. As to where Iran's nuclear program is going, we've got a pretty good indication. Iran has basically moved its program during the last 2 years under the most favorable diplomatic environment it has faced since 2014. It has dramatically moved its nuclear program into larger directions without crossing the line into the final steps of weaponization. Now, that's important because Iran may believe that by staying near weaponization, but not crossing that line, it's able to use that status as a shield, saying to the world, look, you press me on oppression of my people or terrorism or Hamas or anything else, I'll make the last 10 steps to a bomb, and then you'll have a conventional war in your hand. Best not press me. And by the way, there's some fair amount of evidence that's how the world has responded. So Iran's leaders may think that they need to calculate when the advantages of weaponization outweigh the advantages of near weaponization. But until that time comes, every opportunity they have to move a little closer to weaponization, to limit the time they need for those last steps, they will take.
What is your assessment of the Biden administration's handling of the situation with Iran? Critics say the administration has pandered, failed at deterrence. What would a more effective policy look like?
I avoid political commentary, but I will say this. It is clear that Iran does not believe the international community is interested in deterrence. And an adversary of Iran's aggression that does not believe there will be a cost for its actions is a very dangerous and unpredictable adversary and puts us in a very risky world. Our diplomacy must have a coercive element. If relentless diplomacy is endless diplomacy, then that just becomes a slow surrender. Iran must understand that at a certain point, its actions do cross red lines. And one can say over the last years, Iran has undertaken terrorist threats and kidnapping threats within the United States. Iran is now producing military grade, not weapons grade, uranium at 60%. Iran has oppressed its people to a degree unprecedented in modern times. And the list goes on. Hamas, Hezbollah, Houthis. What price has Iran paid? Now, if you're in Tehran and you're holding a leadership meeting and you say, we would like to undertake this aggressive opportunity, this regressive action. And if someone were to say, but what if the world responds and hits us hard? I suspect there would be some laughter at the table.
Norm Roule, so interesting. So insightful. Thank you very much for joining me for this edition of the Threat Status Influencers series. I'm Guy Taylor. Until next time.